I know. That wonder boy of yours opens at the Latin Quarter next week.
J.J.
Say goodbye, Lester.
May I ask you a naive question, Mr. Falco? Exactly how does a press agent work?
Well, answer the man, Sidney. He's trying to take you off the hook.
You just saw a good example of it, Senator. A press agent eats a columnist's dirt and is expected to call it manna.
But don't you help columnists by furnishing them with items?
Sure. A columnist can't do without us, except our good and great friend J.J. forgets to mention that. You see, we furnish him with items.
What, some cheap, gruesome gags?
You print them, don't you?
Yes, with your clients' names attached. That's the only reason the poor slobs pay you, to see their names in my column all over the world. Now I make it out you're doing me a favor?
I didn't say
The day I can't get along without a press agent's handouts, I'll close up shop and move to Alaska lock, stock, and barrel.
Sweep out my igloo. Here I come.
Look, Manny, you rode in here on the senator's shirt tail, so shut your mouth.
Now come, J.J. That's a little too harsh. Anyone seems fair game for you tonight?
This man is not for you, Harvey. And you shouldn't be seen in public with him. Because that's another part of a press agent's life. They dig up scandal about prominent people and shovel it thin among columnists who give them space.
There seems to be some illusion here that escapes me.
We're friends, Harvey. We go as far back as when you were a fresh kid congressman, don't we?
Why is it that everything you say sounds like a threat?
Maybe it's a mannerism, because I don't threaten friends. But why furnish your enemies with ammunition? You're a family man, Harvey, and someday, God willing, you may want to be president. And here you are, out in the open, where any hep person knows that this one is toting that one around for you. Are we kids or what? Next time you come up, you might join me on my TV show.
Thanks, J.J., for what I consider sound advice.
Go thou and sin no more.
Senator?
Hi, Mr. Falco.
Mac, don't let the senator pay that check.
I'll take care of it, Mr. Hunsaker.
President.
Hello, J.J.
Bill?
Hello and welcome to Book versus Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies, and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of colonialbook.com, and this is my good friend and co-host, Margot D. of Brooklyn Fit Chick.
Hi, everyone.
I'm better now than I was last week, but I'm still getting over the dreaded you-know-what. We have a very, very exciting film to talk about today. We cannot wait to get into it. Not just because it stars Burt Lancaster, who we love around here, but this is going to be a really great one. It's going to be super fun. If you're new, you just found us, maybe you also love Burt Lancaster or Tony Curtis, and you want to talk about it with some other folks who also have opinions about these gentlemen. There's a few places where you can meet other listeners of Book versus Movie and interact with us on the internet. Share your suggestions by all means. We are constantly looking for ideas. We are coming up on 10 years of doing this podcast. And every holiday season, we cover holiday movies, and we try to do a brand new episode every single week. I don't know about you, Margot. I'm running out of ideas for holiday movies.
We're going to cover Bell, Book, and Candle, which was a play.
I'm excited,
and we're excited for that. But yeah, other ideas y'all have, please send them over.
The only criteria we have is that it, one, be based on a literary source, and it does not have to be just a book. It could be a poem, a novella, short story, magazine article, a play. As long as it has a literary source, we will consider it. And it has to be something that all of us can get our eyeballs on. So it has to be a movie that is streaming somewhere. It has to be a book that is readily available. Hopefully through the library. but anyway, so with that in mind, please make your suggestions. Join us on the internet. It's a fun place.
We have a basic Facebook page. Be sure to like it, but we're much more interactive in our Facebook group. So you type in Book vs. Movie Podcast Group and ask to join. Thaddeus put 2 posts on there for us that are at the top of the page. One is a list of shows we've covered, books and movies we've covered, and then we also have a page for ideas, those 2 different posts. But just post anything you want there. That would be amazing. We're also on Instagram and Twitter and Threads at Book versus a Movie. I'm trying to get a Blue Sky Spotify credit, so we can also put us on there. We also have an old-timey email, book versus movie podcast, spell that all out, at gmail.com. And if you would like some stickers, just ask for them. We'll drop them in the mail for you.
And if you really enjoy the show and would like to help keep us in books and movies, you can also support us on Patreon.
Patreon. We have all of the episodes from our show starting from when we started at the very, very beginning up until about 2 years ago. And all those are up on our Patreon wall. There's actually quite a few things there that are free. So if you just check out the Patreon wall, you'll find some stuff there you might enjoy. But it literally just goes for the cost of putting the show together, just getting the books and the movies and the software and things like that. So all of you that support us there, we really appreciate it.
Okay, now we are talking today about a very New York-y book and movie. I did not know that this movie was based on a short. Is it a short? Are we calling it a short story, a novella?
Short story, yes. It was a magazine. Yeah. It was printed in Mademoiselle magazine in 1950.
Okay, there you go. Super New York-y, my favorite kind of New York-y, mid-century, and we're talking about Sweet Smell of Success. But something I never noticed, I hadn't noticed before in all these years that we've been doing this, is I guess it's a kind of an American archetype in books and movies to have the all-powerful gossip columnist, the Perez Hilton, TMZ of that time. And because we've covered several movies now where you have and they're always evil, which I love. You have the evil gossip columnist who pulls the strings and can make or break you. So let's talk a little bit about this really excellent story. I grabbed me right away.
Yes.
Yes, The Sweet Smell of Success, which originally was called Tell Me About It Tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so originally he wanted to title it Sweet Smell of Success, but the magazine editors didn't want to put the word smell in the title in their magazine. Okay. So
why is that a thing? I don't know.
It's 1950. I don't know. People are real sensitive about stuff like that. I don't know. But it's Ernest Lehman. He was born 1915 in New York City. Screenwriter, producer, director. Some of his work is his adaptation work is incredible. Hello, Dolly, Sabrina, The Sound of Music, Who's Afraid, Virginia Woolf, West Side Story.
Just The Sound of Music, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and West Side Story. Just that, no big whoop.
No big whoop.
Nothing to see here.
He spent some of his time in the 1930s working for a gossip columnist, and that's where he got the idea. And it used to be when I was 20 years ago when I worked in PR, getting gossip items was a big deal, and getting it was like you want to get Page Six and then Rush and Malloy, or you wanted, and then it was just like you tiered them down, and it was they all want the exclusive. It really is truly like what this movie is about. That's what it was all about. It's still very powerful. It's just we get our gossip differently nowadays. But back then, there was a morning paper and an evening paper, and the person he worked for, I think, was also a theatrical agent or type. But it was Broadway gossip, and Broadway made a lot of money in the 30s and 40s and 50s. There was a lot of musicals that came out that were very, very popular. Really helped with New York City being a tourist destination. Oops, I'm sorry. Sorry, folks. My cat just knocked over a hot tea in my office. We're back. As I was saying, Mr. Lehman worked for a Hollywood Reporter gossip columnist, and I guess he wrote about New York City theatrical things, and he would help plan items. And I guess this person, I've worked with a lot of gossip columnists, and they're kind of the same. They're very competitive. Information is their currency. You want to pal up with them. And so he wrote what it was really like to be an assistant for somebody who gets those items. And so he writes this story, and it's when he's ready, by the way, to do screenplays, because he had been this man's assistant. So he sells a couple of short stories, and once again, this one was sold in 1950 to Mademoiselle magazine. His former boss was very angry with him because the way he's portrayed in here. That's also, by the way,
evil.
Because he's evil. The character and he's not J.J. Hunsinger in the story. They changed his name. And they might have changed it back because what we had is.
Oh, I think you're right. Yes.
We have
I think yes.
Yeah, we're referring to, it's a collection of his short stories that we got this from. We don't have the original Mademoiselle article, but they had different names, but it's also, it's the JJ, whatever it is. It's like, it's all about Walter Winchell. I mean, Walter Winchell was a very powerful gossip columnist, show business columnist. And he, Good Morning, Ladies and Gentlemen of America and All the Ships at Sea. Stanley Tucci played him in a biography on HBO. So he also was, there's all kinds of people that are inspired by the character that Mr. Lehman created. Like I said, writes a few screenplays, and he wants to actually direct The Sweet Smell of Success. The basic story is that the lead character, a public relations man, and he's looking to feed items to this gossip columnist. And this one particular gossip columnist is so powerful, he can make or break your career and what he has to do in order to impress this man. And he's somebody that, like, he has a rotten relationship with his mother, and he and this man are just like at loggerheads. But I think also in the story, the man wants to prevent his daughter from dating someone he doesn't approve of.
It's a sister in the book as well. The Hunziker character has a younger sister, a much younger sister. Their parents have died shortly after the sister was born. So the sister was raised by the brother. He kind of keeps her in a gilded cage, right, if you will. He lavishes her with gifts, and they live a very posh kind of lifestyle, but he controls her entire life. She alludes to, like, she never has any friends or let alone boyfriends that are ever good enough for her brother. And he always ruins any other relationships that she has one way or another. He finds a way. He's a lot of power. He not only has, and I love the way they establish this in the movie, but he not only has the power to make or break somebody's Broadway career, but he has the power to make or break somebody's political career. If they're in law enforcement, he's got a lot of pots on the stove in terms of ways that he can ruin people's lives. So the person, whose life he most ruins is his sister's, and she has this boyfriend who is a jazz musician, which is an interesting choice, I think, because this is at a time when jazz, especially in New York City, is becoming, it's gone from being an art form that, I'm just going to be blunt. It started as a black art form, that when we talked about like Ma Rainey's
Black Bottom. Yeah. So like it started from those origins. And now in the mid-century, there's this melding where we've got bebop, and it's becoming much more intellectual. You have more white artists who are involved with it. And so it's in this phase where it's also starting to be considered high art, but not to J.J. Hunziker. So, the fact that he is in this kind of highbrow jazz operation is not impressing this young woman's powerful older brother. And so, but he also doesn't want to be, I don't know why. This is the part about the story I don't get. Like, he's so controlling and such a heavy, and so railroads his sister, like, about everything. Why does he care if she knows that he's involved in wrecking this relationship or not? He's manipulative. He just wants to, he wants to be in charge, and he wants her to know he's in charge, but he also doesn't want her to feel like she is being abused. Like, it's more about, he cares about her ultimately better than anyone else could possibly care about her.
Right. It's always couched in that, isn't it?
Yeah.
So anyway, so he gets this press agent who is desperate to please him. And I mean desperate to do his dirty work for him. And and there's different, I lost the plot a little bit reading the story. Because there's different avenues that he's taking to try to ruin this jazz musician, up to and including planting marijuana on him, right?
Mm-hmm. Also, like threats of communism, I think.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Also going on at the time.
Right.
Which is very interesting considering who's going to end up adapting this for the screen. Yeah, so he takes a couple of different, and the sister is not fooled for a moment. The sister knows the whole time that it's her brother. It's very, yeah, you're right. It's just about manipulating her, isn't it? About like, I know that I'm responsible for this, but you can't prove it, so you can't accuse me.
Right.
Basically. So you're helping. So she's, really messing with this poor young woman. And yeah, so they ruin this musician. And a difference between the book and the movie, if I'm remembering correctly, that's how the book goes. And I don't trust my Paxlovid-addled brain this week. For real. Like this morning, as I was waking up, I was going over my mind, like, oh, the holidays are coming, and I got going over my holiday list, and I thought, oh no, I didn't get anything for my father. What?
Oh
my father's been gone for like 18 years, y'all. That's where my brain is at right now. So I may not be remembering this correctly. Is what I'm trying to say.
I read it a few days ago, very quickly. So it's the briefest outline of this story.
It's a very fast, pace.
Yeah,
it happens. It moves real quick. But I seem to remember that the sister, when she's talking to Sydney, the press agent who's ruining her relationship, that she says, basically, I'm not even really in love with this jazz musician. It's just I want out of my brother's house, I think is what she says. Because she's not as, in the movie, they're much more in love, which I think is much better for the movie. It's more cinematic and everything. And they're very much, the musician is more savvy in the movie than he is. He's a little bit more of a chump in the story than he is in the movie. And yeah, so you have she's this sister who's she's ground into nothing, then she's just her whole life having to put up with his brother trying to ruin everything and run everything. This is she feels her one shot at getting out, and he's ruining that.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the story, and I didn't mention, but Walter Winchell, who went from being a very powerful newspaper columnist to a radio person, and then he had a TV show in the 50s for several years, and he was a host. He had a lot of power, and supposedly he had a daughter that his youngest daughter he was super protective of, and when she was dating somebody she liked, he had her committed to a mental institution in order to keep control of her. And I don't think she ever got married at all.
So weird. Who does that?
I don't
get that.
It's a level of like control freak I don't understand. And it's so that's the story. And so we have, it's like 1957, 56, 57 when they're going to put this production together. And Ernest Lehman said he was going to direct it and write the screenplay, but he became sick during the process.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yeah.
I was wondering about that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so it was bought by Burt Lancaster's. He had his own production company. And so they put this all together. He was going to be a part of that. And then he got very sick. So that's when they brought in Clifford Odets to work on the script. And then Odets we've talked about him before. He was the partner of Lillian Hellman for many years. He was a writer. He was known for being, I think, something of a speed freak. He was somebody who had done his share of drugs, and he would turn up. And it's so funny because I'm working on a project now where there's a screenwriter who has a lot of problems. Yeah.
Sorry, it's not Lillian Hellman. That's Dashiell Hammett.
Oh, sorry. Right.
Clifford Odets with Louise Rayner.
We've talked. I'm sorry. Like these people, they all were in the same circles. He was with her. He supposedly, and I'm working on a project now also about a screenwriter that was working on a movie like right up until the last day they filmed, and he would just turn in the pages, and this drove Burt Lancaster crazy. But Burt Lancaster is a very handsome young actor. He's executive producing his projects. He's somebody who's very savvy about money and control and power and things like that, and knows that Walter Winchell does not want this movie to be made, but it's going to be made. And so then we also have, so that's why we have Alexander McKendrick. He's from Boston. I don't know if this is his first movie, but it's one of his earlier films.
Most food reviewers detail the intricacies of bites so delicious no one could possibly afford to try them. But the Fine Dining Podcast? It's for the rest of us, baby. Join me, your host Michael Ornelas, as I weather the caloric avalanche of every chain restaurant in America in search of which one is the most mediocre, a title they don't even realize they're vying for. Are you brave enough to hit up a Waffle House at midnight? I am. Are you willing to eat menu items with words like explosion and volcano in the name? I say bring it on. Does your Google search history include the phrase, "Am I dying if my fingers go numb and I black out while watching the corporate-mandated line dance at Texas Roadhouse?" Yeah, me neither. But the search for the perfect 5.00 dining experience out of 10 is my life's mission, and I won't stop until I find it for you. It's not fine dining, but it's fine. Check out Fine Dining, the search for the most mediocre restaurant in America, wherever you get your podcasts.
Cinematographer is James Wong Howe. They decided to film most of it in New York City as much as they can. It was in the winter when they did this, and New York in the winter is cold, it's damp. We have Tony Curtis, who was a heartthrob at the time. He had those long eyelashes that people talk about in the film, how pretty he is. I remember
he's gorgeous. He's absolutely gorgeous.
Gorgeous. I mean, and he was with Janet Leigh for a while. Mm-hmm. They were married. They had Jamie Lee Curtis. They had her sister Kelly. So this is his big break as an adult actor, being in a real part that's very meaty. And the two of them had a great time working together, but they were making something far darker than what most people would go to see at the box office.
Definitely. I think probably most people, you're right. Most people are like, oh, Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis. What a fun little romp that's going to be. I wanted to mention one little thing, because something I wondered about when I was watching this movie, we probably should play the trailer.
Yes.
But before, I just want to mention how the story ends, because it is a little bit different. And I was trying to look up and I couldn't find anything, but I was wondering if it didn't have something to do with the Hays Code, the way that they ended the movie versus the way that they ended the book. So it's similar, but there's some key little things. Sidney, the press agent, who's played by Tony Curtis in the movie, he succeeds in ruining the musician's career and ending that relationship. He has this weird, what's the word I'm looking for? Rapport with Susan, who is the sister, throughout the story. Like, he kind of, if you didn't know that he was angling to get into the brother's good graces, you'd be like, he's really interested in this girl. So once the relationship is over, she calls him, and I don't remember if she tells him that she's thinking of jumping off the balcony of their high-rise apartment. I don't remember if she says it over the phone, but she's whatever it is, she gets him over to the apartment, and there she is, and she's threatening to do that. And he talks her out of it, talks her back into the room. And then all of a sudden, again, trigger warning, all of a sudden, they hear the brother come home. The brother's coming home, and he's like, Sidney is thinking like, oh, finally, great. I can finally explain what's going on here. And he can handle this, because this is above my pay grade kind of thing. And Susan, the girl, starts screaming and ripping at her clothes and saying, leave me alone, because she's now getting back at Sidney. See? And so when the story ends, JJ, the gossip columnist, is approaching the room where Sidney is begging for mercy, and she's acting as though she's just been attacked. And that is how the story ends. So the story ends with basically everybody's ruined. Sidney has ruined this girl's life out of greed. He's also ruined the brothers. Everybody is it's a terrible ending for everybody involved. Least of all the musician he's been falsely framed and is probably in jail now. So that's how it ends, with like it's kind of open ended, but there's no. What I'm trying to say is there's no real comeuppance.
No. And then, with the Hays Code, you weren't allowed to let the bad guy basically get away with stuff. So nobody could get away with their bad behavior. Okay, let's play the trailer. We'll dive into this incredible film.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Match me, Sidney. You sound happy, Sidney. Why should you be happy when I'm not?
I'd hate to take a bite out of you. You're a cookie full of arsenic.
Don't remove the gangplank, Sidney. You may want to get back on board.
From now on, the best of everything is good enough for me. Starting today, you can play marbles with his eyeballs. Cats in a bag and the bag's in a river. If you're funny, James, I'm a pretzel. Success.
Get these babies while they're hot.
I was just going to say, first of all, like the score in this movie, I am blown off the sofa from the first shot. What? I mean, it's like it grabbed me by the lapels and was like, listen to this. It's so good. It's such a great opening. It's amazing.
It's 7 years later from when the time this all first started. As Margot was saying, jazz was kind of going through its own thing. Jazz was like swing music in the 40s. So that was much more, it was very popular. Anybody liked swing music, and it was all about dancing and being in big spaces and big halls. It still had that idea of jazz, like people had their own solos and things like that. But this kind of jazz music is headier. It's more for an intimate crowd. It's for little clubs. It's got, when singing, it's sort of like, improvising all over the place.
It's not like, it's not swing dancing. It's not dancing at all. It's listening and snapping for applause. And we have Chico Hamilton, the Chico Hamilton, are they a trio? I can never remember. Anyway, he's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And the music is so good. The score is good. And Chico Hamilton plays himself, which I think is really cool. He's got music. It's excellent jazz music. His stuff is featured on a lot of movie scores, including Boogie Nights.
Oh, that's right.
He's on the Boogie Nights soundtrack. And we have as Steve, who plays a credible musician. We have Martin Milner, who I remember from Adam 12. I don't know about you.
Adam 12, but also Valley of the Dolls, which is an episode on our Patreon wall, which we had a lot of fun talking about.
So nice, we did it twice.
Yes, it is. It's one of the ones we did twice. Martin Milner is his name. They're playing against type. They're both playing bad guys. And then for Tony Curtis, this is his first. And he was such a teen heartthrob that it's similar to something else I'm working on right now. But when he was on set, they had to keep the girls away. Like they would ruin takes because they'd be screaming for him. And New York City, Times Square's never looked better or just
the
exciting.
Lighting, the highs and lows of the black and white in this movie, breathtaking. You could frame any still. It's so gorgeous the way this thing is shot. When there's all the scenes of the street scenes with nightclubs and the nightlife in the background and cop cars and neon sign. I could just watch this whole thing on silent, but I'm not, because the score is so good and the story is so good, and I'm just so impressed with this movie.
And also, once again, it was filmed in like January, February of 57. So when it wasn't snowing, it was rainy-ish. It was dark, and it makes the city all of it just looks different when it's wet, and especially at night. And he loved that gloss and that sheen, so they kind of kept it throughout the whole movie. So you really see this. Let's talk about. We have Susan Harrison, who plays Susan Hunsaker. Burt Lancaster plays J.J. Hunsaker, and so this is our Walter Winchell.
I mean, okay.
Where's the script?
I got that boy coming over here today. If I can trust my eyes, and I think I can, Susie knows all about your dirty work.
Can't hurt.
Can't hurt. I had to get that boy his job back.
Look, JJ. We can tie this off in a one neat bundle. Address it to the dumps, to oblivion. We're doing great, but please do it my way. I've cased this kid. I know his ins and outs. He's full of juice and vinegar, just waiting for a big shot like you to put on the squeeze. You got the boy's job back, okay. But he's not going to accept your favor. The manager, yeah, but not that boy.
What has this boy got that Susie likes?
Integrity. Acute. Like indigestion.
What does this mean? Integrity.
A pocket full of firecrackers. Waiting for a match. You know, it's a new wrinkle. To tell you the truth, I never thought I'd make a killing on some guy's integrity.
I'd hate to take a bite out of you. You're a cookie full of arsenic.
He's so good in this movie.
He's so good in this movie. And the thing is, like, I read somewhere they had discussed casting Hume Cronin, who I love.
Yes.
And Hume Cronin does look very much like Walter Winchell. Like, if you're like, which of these men are you going to get to play Walter Winchell? Definitely you're going to go with Hume. But because Walter Winchell was more of he's older. He's kind of a Columbo type, kind of a wrinkly suit. He's been up all night. He's not Burt Lancaster, just put it that way. But to have it be Burt Lancaster, with his stature and his very voice, I could listen to all day. There just gives this degree of menace that, with a physical threat, I think, behind it.
Yeah.
Because he is so big. He's so much bigger than Tony Curtis and everybody else that he goes up against in this movie, that there is also almost a physical threat about him that you would never have gotten with like a Hume Cronin. Just a brilliant choice. He's so scary.
He's terrifying with his glasses and that haircut, and he never takes his jacket off. He's always in the suit. The way he holds a cigarette, the way he answers the phone, the way he bosses people around. It's a really amazing performance. So his column is all about theater. Once again, theater makes a lot of money in New York. It's a big deal to get mentioned in the gossip. You definitely want, nice word, advanced word for your show, so they sell tickets. Susan Harrison, Sidney Falco is Tony Curtis. Just fantastic. I love that he's in the Brill building. Like that's his office. Like he has an office, but he has an apartment in the back. And
the sets are so
well done.
I love all the there's a lot of wonderful, wonderful New York exterior photography. But yeah, he's got the door that with his sign that's scotch taped onto the door, which tells you everything you need to know about this guy. And he's got his secretary, who is also a character in the book. And it's kind of like I'll try to clean the expression about poop running downhill. Everybody treats Sidney with contempt because he's basically the entertainment equivalent of an ambulance chaser.
Yes.
He's just begging these gross gossip columnists to place stories about his clients, and everybody hates him. And he's really low on the food chain. And then he has this secretary who's a little bit in love with him, and he is horrible to her. He treats her abysmally. And she's just trying to help him. Like, she really cares about him, and she's doing everything she can to, like, keep his business going. And I think he even alludes to, like, he goes long periods without paying her.
Right.
I don't remember if that's in the book or in the movie. And she just is like, okay. With everything.
She just wants to be around him. It's horrible. In the book, it's he makes her work all the time. Like, she's always like, hey, it's hot out. They don't have air conditioning. Can I go home? All the other secretaries are home. No, stay at your desk. He has, like, contempt for everyone around him. He's also, it's like he's scurrying around like a rat looking for cheese. He's always chasing down one client to get another client, that he's hiding from a client because he promised them that they'd be in the column. When we meet him in the movie, at the start of the movie, he hasn't been in JJ's column. And I love how they do this. They're going around the newspaper stand, and then he goes to the shop to look for his, and I've been there because I had to do this. It's supposed to be in there. It's not in there. It's not in the paper. And you're just like, oh man, what am I going to say? How am I going to explain this? Because he sells himself on having his access to J.J. Hunsinger. They don't need him otherwise. And Hunsinger knows this. And he knows they're all desperate to be in his column. So we have Jeff. Her name is Jeff Donnell. That's Sally, the secretary. Barbara Nichols is Rita. Is Rita the cigarette lady?
Rita is the cigarette girl. Yeah, I know.
Oh,
Which
my God.
I don't remember that story being in the original piece, right? She's just invented as part of this film to show us just how much of a worm Sidney is. Like, he really doesn't care about anything except his own paycheck.
Don't tell me you've been playing around with Leo Bartha.
No, that's what I mean. I'm being fired for what I didn't do. He came in last week on a real dull, rainy night. I knew he was, but I didn't let on. Kept staring at me all night. Are you listening?
Avidly. He was staring.
Staring. Consequently, when he approached me on his way out, I wasn't surprised.
He was doing a special Sunday piece on
cigarette girls. And naturally...
You were thrilled about being interviewed. And, were you interviewed?
In his apartment.
Where was his wife?
I don't know. It's a big apartment. Only I wasn't interviewed. In fact, I was totally unprepared for what happened.
Oh, come on, Chickie. We're friends from way back. A big columnist comes into this club without his ball and chain, and you make like a delicatessen counter. What did you expect he was going to do in his apartment?
But Sidney, sweetheart, the man must have been out of his mind. It was only 11 o'clock in the morning. I was so taken aback, I said anything that popped into my sleepy head. If I'm not mistaken, I think I even ordered the man out of his own house. He was furious. And by the time I could have been put in a tropical island mood, I was out on the street. That night, Van Cleef calls me into his office. He's got nothing against me, he says, only can't afford to antagonize columnists. So I tell him how I still have Sonny at the military academy. Sidney, do you think you could do something?
That's what I'm thinking, Rita, maybe.
Sidney, do you still keep your key under the mat?
Can you be there at 2:30?
So she's a cigarette.
They're just awful.
Rita is a cigarette girl, not at 21, which I think just closed in New York City. That was there forever.
Only just closed, yeah.
Yeah.
She's a cigarette girl at like, I don't know.
Tito's.
Yeah, like the Stork Club or something like that.
Right.
And I don't know why she goes to Sydney. I guess they're just old friends.
I think she also wants to sleep with him because he's beautiful Tony Curtis.
Tony Curtis.
Yeah.
Again, this is only in the movie. And she has had a different gossip columnist who is married take advantage of her. And it's not clear, is she pregnant by this guy? Like something, I'm not clear. Because again, the Hays Code, everybody speaks in euphemisms.
Right.
So, because she says, I'm in trouble. Because otherwise, what trouble is she in, really, except that she slept with this guy?
Yeah, she could get fired. I mean, if his wife...
She could get fired, but...
Yeah, but she also provides Sidney with his items. Like
tips.
Yes. She tells him, like, who came in, who did they sit with, that kind of thing. So they have that kind of a relationship where there's a transactional quality to it, but she also thinks that this is her friend and that he cares about her.
Right.
So when he sets her up with a random columnist in order to write something terrible about Susan's boyfriend,
Jazz, Adam 12 guy.
The Adam 12 guy, he offers her as the payment or as to entice her. And she thinks they're just going to have drinks. And then he's like, oh, I'm going to go for a walk. I got a business meeting in the middle of the night. And she says to him, I'm a human being. What are you doing? Like, you know me. Why are you trying to make me do this thing? And he's such a skunk that he just makes it happen because he's got to be with J.J. Hunsinger. He hadn't, everyone's going after him now because none of their clients are getting press, and that's all he cares about. And it's just that spinning wheel. He sacrifices her for that.
What kind of an act is this?
Don't you think I have any feelings? What am I? A bowl of fruit? A tangerine that peels in a minute?
I beg your pardon. How do you like this? I turned myself inside out to do you a favor, now I'm the heavy. Here's your shoe. There's your coat. And there's the door.
Sidney, I don't do this sort of thing.
What sort of thing?
This sort of thing.
You need him for a favor, don't you? Well, so do I. I need his column tonight. Didn't you ask me to do something about your job? Don't you have a kid in military school?
You're a snake, Falco. You're a louse. A real louse.
Honey, he's gonna help you. How many drinks does it take to put you in that tropical island mood? Havana, that's where we met.
Here's mud in your column.
Blessings on me, the boat. Well, gotta run. See you kids later. Hurry back. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. And I'd give you a lot of leeway.
There's a scene where JJ, they're at 21 Club and they're sitting with a senator and an actress and then her agent. And JJ just completely demolishes them all. Like, I know what's really happening here. And he does this to people's faces. And they realize, like, they just take it because he's JJ Hunsinger.
Not only that, the senator thanks him.
Yeah.
Thanks him for his good advice.
Yeah. Yeah, because he doesn't want to get written about. So he's trying to play ball with him. But they're going back and forth. So Martin Milner, Steve Dallas is his name. Steve gets this item written about him where there's so many people, by the way, in this cast. They don't even list them. A lot of people, for some reason.
A lot of people are just not listed.
On either thing.
Because we're in nightclub after nightclub. There's a lot of really amazing bit players.
Mm-hmm.
I love the gossip columnist that Rita has originally gotten herself in, quote unquote, in trouble with. Sidney confronts that guy and his wife at a nightclub. And I mean, the guy and his wife are amazing. Again, not in the book at all, I don't think. Yeah, the whole thing about Rita is just in the movie. But it's great because it does show you to what lengths Sidney is willing to go. And this is before he sells his friend to Larry Tate from Bewitched. But he goes to the first guy that Rita had gotten in trouble with, and it's like, listen, I know this thing about you and Rita. Be a shame if your wife here found out anything about it. And the guy totally surprises Sydney by saying, you know what? You're right. I made a mistake. And he turns to his wife and like tells her everything. And she says, wow, like that's the first thing of integrity I've seen you do in years.
In decades. Yeah.
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 And so they're fine.
They're going to be fine, I guess. I mean, but
there goes Sydney's leverage.
That's his leverage that he has. It's the only thing that he has. And so when that doesn't work, JJ really puts the screws on him. JJ, by the way, has the police on his side. They'll beat up somebody for him. I mean, he has a lot of people that support him, and he lives in this lavish apartment. His sister, Susan, is, the damsel in distress. She's always wearing a fur coat.
Yeah. She's always wearing a fur coat. She's always nervous, doesn't want to speak up, which I get it. JJ's like 3 times her size and very loud and intimidating. By the way, I love that apartment.
Yes, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize, because I don't think there's a mention of this in the book at all, but with all this back and forth, and she's so desperate to get away, and she loves Steve, the jazz player. She's 19 years old. She's 19. I feel like there's something that could be worked out here with her being 19.
Yeah.
She's very young, but she's also not that young. She's over 18. She can certainly marry him if she wants to. She doesn't need her brother's permission. So I don't get it.
He's got her convinced that she can't make choices by herself.
Right.
That if he doesn't approve of something she's doing, that's the worst thing in the world. So she has to test those boundaries, and he wants to keep her in a box. Like I said, he doesn't want his sister to grow up and leave him. And also somebody told me that they think that there's some sort of vague homosexual thing with him and Tony Curtis, which I don't see. But another thing is this dialogue is so tricky. This dialogue it's great. I mean, it's a reason to get captions is just for this dialogue, because it's so good. It is so sharp.
And everybody's speaking in code, everybody's like, well, you know what I mean about the thing. You were the one who mentioned the thing that you told me to make to the guy. And you're like, well, I don't remember who you're talking about anymore. Yeah, I guess that's it. But yeah, he's very intimidating. I mean, Burt Lancaster is very scary in this movie.
We talked about him in The Swimmer, by the way, which is another really great Lancaster film, and a great performance from him. Sidney's got to find a way to do this. So he gets the column item to come out that says that he's a pothead and that he's a card-carrying member of the Communist Party, which is a big no-no in show business back then. Probably even still, but very much still. Yeah, I mean, just watch that Elia Kazan gets his lifetime Oscar footage. People were well upset about that, but Clifford Odets, I think, right? He had also spoken to the committee. Yeah, he sure did. He did?
Yeah, he had belonged to the Communist Party for less than a year. He spoke to the committee on May 19th and May 20th in executive session and in public. Is
he the one that dated Frances Farmer, the actress? I remember that from the movie Frances. And I think Sam Shepard played him.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. So it says here, Odets was tormented by public reaction to his testimony for the rest of his life. In his autobiography, Elia Kazan recalls incidents of Odets being accosted in New York City on the street and snubbed in Hollywood restaurants after his committee appearance.
When was his appearance?
Oh, this would have been before this movie.
Yeah.
1952.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's 5 years before they make this movie. And people were salty about that. People who did
I bet they were pretty salty about. Not only did he go and ostensibly name names, not only did he go before the committee, but now he's writing this character that gets framed for being a communist. Mm-hmm. That's some huevos, man.
Yeah, well, once again, he was writing this on speed. This is what I've been reading, but he also was like turning in the pages every day. So the actors barely had time to learn their dialogue. It's amazing they got it out. Like this picture, the director's like, I had no idea like how this was going to end. It was just constantly changing.
I mean, really though?
Yeah.
Really though? I mean, I can understand you didn't know about the dialogue, but it pretty much follows the story. We just have a few extra subplots here and there. Like we have some extra characters that we get to see, the club owner here or the thing with Rita there. But it's not like, oh, how is it going to end? It ends almost exactly the same way it does in the story.
So Steve Dallas, Hunsinger helps him. He makes a phone call so he doesn't lose his gig because that was his whole life. But he still fights back Hunsinger and says, you're a creep. You bully people. This is terrible. This is terrible what you're doing. And so he's being punished for sticking up for himself, but also just sticking it to Hunsinger, which I guess nobody ever did.
And I love that. And I like this about the movie a lot. I think is really, just like I think the addition of the Rita story really drives home how despicable Sydney is. Similarly, that thing, and it's subtle, but the thing with Steve calling out JJ to his face, JJ literally like took away the guy's livelihood. And ruined his upcoming marriage.
He said to I
was gonna say, so he has total power. Yeah. And Steve is not saying anything to JJ that isn't true. But similarly, JJ holds all the cards. We've established that. He holds all the cards. So why do you care if this little flea of a jazz musician is like mouthing back to you? What do you care? He cares a lot. He now wants this guy destroyed.
Yeah. Take it all away.
Like he doesn't say break his legs, but he pretty much might as well just say break his legs. Like that's how much he wants to just completely ruin not just a future with his sister, but any future, period.
I want that boy taken apart.
JJ, why do something that's going to drive them right back into each other's arms?
I know how to handle Susie. You just handle the boy. Preferably tonight.
What's tomorrow, a holiday?
Your fat cop friend.
I think I'm going home. Maybe I left my sense of humor in my other suit.
You've got a God-given brain, Sidney. Use it. You think this is a personal thing with me? Are you telling me I think of this in terms of personal pique? Don't you see that today that boy wiped his feet on the choice and the predilections of 60 million men and women in the greatest country in the world? If you had any morals yourself, you'd understand the immorality of that boy's stand today. It wasn't me he criticized. It was my readers. Don't remove the gangplank, Sidney. You may want to get back on board.
JJ, it's one thing to wear your dog collar. When it turns into a noose, I'd rather have my freedom.
The man in jail is always for freedom.
Except if you'll excuse me, JJ, I'm not in jail.
You're in jail, Sidney. You're a prisoner of your own fears, your own greed and ambition. You're in jail.
You're blind, Mr. Magoo. This is the crossroads for me. I won't get killed. Not for a lifetime pass to the Polar Grounds. Not if you serve me Cleopatra on a plate.
Sidney, I told you.
JJ, I swear to you on my mother's life, I wouldn't do that. Not if you gave me a column would I do a thing.
And who do you suppose writes the column while Susie and I are away for 3 months? The man on the moon? Thank you, Sidney. And Sidney, I'll have that piece of paper back.
in anything that he would ever want to do. And that moment, I think, is really terrifying and tells you everything you need to know about.
Why are we even doing this? There's so many other things we could be doing. Why do you even care about this kid? What do you care about this silly musician? But he wants him to frame him. So he has him put marijuana joints, cigarettes anyway, in his pocket. And then a cop roughs him up outside the club just to let everybody know I could do it because I can do it. I'm doing it because I can. And it's a lesson to Sydney too. Like, don't you get any ideas about crossing me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. So that's what happens. They totally destroy this guy. And just like in the story, Sydney gets a phone call to go to JJ's apartment. He thinks it's a message from JJ, which, at this point, JJ has promised that he's going to let Sydney even write his column for a little spell. He's going to take Susan away on the Queen Mary, which I think that's in the story too, about them going on the Queen Mary. Mm-hmm. He suggests that he will let Sydney hold the reins of power and write his column while he's away.
For 3 months.
And for 3 months. I mean, that's a lot. So that's a big deal. So that's like a big carrot for that guy. And so he thinks he's going to discuss that. And instead he finds Susan, just like in the story, finds her out on the balcony. And I feel, and something about seeing it rather than reading it, I really felt for her so much more in the movie, even than I did in the book, for her, just how much she has just been batted around by all these men. And it's different. Again, it's different in the book. Susan is not trying to make it seem as though she's being attacked. She's just upset. And it just sounds, from the outside, as JJ's approaching, it sounds as though that's what's happening. He walks in, he finds his sister in her nightgown, and her totally covered up nightgown, and Tony Curtis there, who's not even close to her. He's like in the corner, and he just jumps to all of these conclusions, or at least he says he has jumped to all these conclusions. It's more likely that he realizes, I truly have now all the cards. I can do whatever I want with this guy. And, I'm kind of done with him. He's kind of more trouble than he's worth. Now, that's where the story ends. But in the movie, this is what makes me wonder about the Hays Code. Mm-hmm. In the movie, Burt Lancaster picks up the phone and calls the policeman, his police friend, to come, and he says, Sydney's the one who planted those cigarettes. Steve's innocent. Which I wonder, you're going to claim Steve, do you want your sister to go back with him? Because you just let Steve off the hook. That's the part that makes me a little I'm not so sure. And then Tony Curtis, as he's running out of the lavish apartment, is saying, I'm going to tell everybody what you did. He's got proof because he has written proof of JJ telling him to call the policeman on Steve. And so we know in the movie, that Tony Curtis is going to tell everybody about what JJ has done. And JJ is going to get his comeuppance because it's the Hays Code. And Tony Curtis is going to suffer some consequences because it's the Hays Code, but not as many as JJ. And that's how it ends. And I felt like we didn't need to have the comeuppance for JJ. But anyway, I love it. I love the whole thing. Yeah. It's got the score. I'm there.
Yeah, it's got the score. It looks amazing. I mean, she's going back to her boyfriend. I guess there's some comeuppance. I don't leave the movie feeling like it's that arc, though. I don't know why. I leave the movie feeling like he's still in charge.
I agree.
And supposedly that Burt Lancaster tried to take over the picture because he thought it was, it's such a poke of the eye against Walter Winchell and other gossip columnists at the time that he was trying to fix the ending and he couldn't. So he had to bring them back to fix it. So I think they all didn't know how they wanted it to. I think they wanted it to end just like as dire as it started. And because that's what really would happen.
And it almost does.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so close. The ending is so close, except for that last little bit of Tony Curtis escaping the apartment and threatening to tell everybody. Except for that, it's pretty much the way that it is in the movie. And so, I mean, I kind of felt bad because although I'm sure these are all awful people. The story is not written about, the original story is not about Walter Winchell. It's about that other guy, the Hollywood Reporter guy. But the movie is very much about Walter Winchell. Not only did Walter Winchell's daughter get hospitalized, which is something that gets alluded to in the movie. I mean, it's really going after this guy. Like, it's really going after his kids. Not only that, like, there's an allusion to, like, oh, we need to get you to under a doctor's care, Susan. But also, I think Walter Winchell's son, again, trigger warning, died by suicide, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's really grim. It's a very, very grim movie filled with horrible, awful people who use human beings right and left and center for gossip and a quick buck. And it's super good.
Yeah, and I could tell you as somebody who was in that world, like, they do run on that. I mean, people do, like, put their entire lives, their whole personality, everything into those, like, quick hits and all that, just that little moment of glory. And it's never enough. And there's just people that are never-ending buckets of need, and this is a story about that. And there's lots of people like that in show business and other places.
What I wondered in the I know, well, now more than ever with the influencers and all of this,
the billionaires we have, and
but I wondered both in reading the book, because I couldn't remember the plot of this movie at all when I read the book. Excuse me. But the thing that I wondered, both reading the book and watching the movie, is what is Sidney's end game here? Like, what is the outcome that he's hoping for? All it is a continued trail of breadcrumbs from JJ to continue to print these little bits and pieces in his column and keeping his clients happy. Like, that's the best case scenario for Sidney, which is miserable. Like, you have to get up every day and that's your day? Ew.
Up into the night, all night.
All night long.
Yeah.
He's running around chasing these tiny little insignificant, stupid, insipid stories and trying to sell them. And so even, so you kind of get, again, I really love that edition of him dangling the, like, I'll let you write my column while I'm away,
right.
You get why that's such a big fish for him. And now he's really desperate because that's an escape from this, again, which would have been the best possible scenario for him, this miserable hamster wheel of chasing horrible stories about horrible people and getting other horrible people to place them and sell them to the public. Yuck.
Yeah.
So I wondered that. Yeah, like, it's such a icky world, and all the ickiest parts of it are what are the most enduring parts somehow.
Yeah.
At least that's how I felt coming away. I'm sure that's not true. There's still art and beauty and stuff like that. But it did make me, like, super bummed out. Like, it made me never want to look at Instagram again.
Well, yeah, it shines a harsh light. It doesn't do well. Walter Winchell, it did okay. It was like a $3 million budget, and they made like $2 million. So it's not until like decades later that it becomes the classic that it's now considered. But Walter Winchell was outside the theater in New York having his minions kind of tell him, oh yeah, it's not very good. Yeah, we hear this movie's not good, and Hollywood doesn't like it. And so the number one movie from 1957, The Bridge on the River Kwai.
Okay, well, okay, all right.
Sayonara, I've never seen. That's number 2. Peyton Place, number 3. I could totally see why. I'd see that now.
Oh boy, talk about Valley of the Dolls.
Yep. Gunfight at the OK Corral. A Farewell to Arms. The Pride and the Passion. Island in the Sun. Jailhouse Rock. I Was a Teenage Werewolf. And The Prince and the Showgirl. So, like, that was the kind of stuff that was really...
So, I have seen Sayonara. Sayonara, you've probably seen it too. It's the one with Marlon Brando, and he's an American Air Force fighter pilot, and he falls in love with it's the Korean War, and he falls in love with this Japanese woman. Do you remember that one?
Mm-mm.
And Yeah. So so out of all of those, so now I'm actually familiar with all of those movies. That's amazing. That almost never happens. But not a single one of them is the work of art that this movie is.
It's not film. This is film noir.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Oh,
this is. It's a masterpiece. I mean,
it really is.
It really the music, the acting,
the dialogue.
It really catches a time and place in New York. Those nightclubs, the jazz clubs, the way they apparently they built like 12 feet off the ground so they can make lights come up and smoke come up when they're playing. And
the lighting
is incredible in this movie.
When you first see, and this is probably, maybe this is how they did it, although I don't know how they would have done it in 1957. But when you first see Rita, the cigarette girl, and she's walking through the crowded nightclub. And cigarette girls, for those of you who don't know, they were because you used to be able to smoke everywhere. And so you would go to a nightclub and there would be these girls. They were scantily clad, usually in just like a little leotard kind of thing. So you could see all of their legs. And they would have a tray, like an open box, like a drawer that hung with sort of like a guitar strap around their neck, just below their bust, conveniently. That would be filled with cigarettes and matches because people continued to smoke. If you ran out of smokes, you would leave the club, right? But if you have girls who are walking around selling smokes for real cheap and giving you little commemorative Stork Club or 21 matchbooks to prove that you had been there, it was a whole thing. So she's walking through this crowded nightclub up to Tony Curtis, and there is light coming from her cigarette tray up into her face. She's being lit like as if by a footlight somehow. It's spectacular. So you can't not look at this radiant blonde,
right,
little cigarette girl, like making her way. There's no missing her because she's just glowing as she sees Tony Curtis like, oh, there he is. And she's making her way over to him. The lighting in this thing is just, I'm sure people must write whole papers about.
They have to.
Just the lighting in this movie because it is so impressive. The interior and the exterior lighting. Like I say, his sad little office.
His apartment is in his office in the Brill building. It's not like he even lives in an apartment building where he'd meet other people. Or it's such a sad life, and it's so, just like you said, what's the end game? What do you do with this? Do you work for a bigger PR agency? Do you write columns? Like what do you do with this? Because he's just, like I said, he's like a hamster on a hamster wheel. He's just like go, and there's no great output. It's just sort of like this old-timey comedian, hey, I'll get you in this column. And then they're screaming with laughter just the constant BS that this guy has to sell.
Did nobody tell him he's Tony Curtis?
You could be a model, dude. You could be an actor. Somebody even calls him eyelashes in the movie. I'm like, he does have beautiful eyes.
They are gorgeous.
Yes.
So, book or movie?
Movie.
Totally movie.
Right.
Yeah. The book, though, the story is excellent and it's very well written. It does really just gallop along. And so to the point where I said, like, here and there, I lost the thread a little teeny bit. It does, he does a good job with the dialogue in the story as well, but also, just painting the scene. Like, that New York backdrop is all there in the story. And somehow we got it on film in, the best possible way. I don't know how they managed. It's amazing. It's so good.
It's great. If you've never seen it, do yourself a favor and see it.
Oh.
It's one of the greats.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like a bummer because, like I said, it's sad. I mean, if you're looking at it on paper, it's a very sad story in terms of, everybody's arc is a sad arc.
Right.
There's no happy arcs here. But the dialogue is so snappy and the characters are so interesting and the sets and the whole thing. It's great.
The music.
It's amazing.
The music is so good. It just keeps you going.
The jazz music is so good. And then the score is it is New York City. It's just love it.
Yep.
For all the things you've done, JJ, I know I should hate you. But I don't. I pity you.
So we were talking before we got on the air about what we're going to do next. We've talked about Burt Lancaster a few times now because we love him.
Mm-hmm.
We of course talked about him when we talked about The Swimmer, which was based on John Cheever's story, which was a very good story as well. And we talked about him in his first role, which is he's also super good in, although he's not in it that much, a movie called The Killers,
Mm-hmm.
which was based on an early, I think, short story by Ernest Hemingway, which is also super good. And so we're going to be looking at Hemingway again.
We're going to be talking about The Old Man and the Sea. It's a shortish story. It's like 124 pages. The movie, which stars Spencer Tracy as a Cuban fisherman. It's
Sure.
It's available everywhere, so it's pretty easy to rent, to stream. So we're very excited about that. But please, if you have suggestions of your own, especially for the holidays coming up, we also cover songs to movies. We did Last Christmas, the George Michael one. We did that last year. So
that was such a good movie.
Such a great. Maybe I'll watch that again.
I loved that movie.
Yeah, that was good. All right, so please send us your suggestions. And once again, our email is bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. And Margot, where can they find you?
You can find me online at coloniabook.com, and all of my social media callouts are at She's Not Your Mama. And where can they find you?
You could find me at either Brooklyn Fit Chick or Brooklyn Margot on all the things. I wish I had more consistency for y'all, but that's the way it is. And I do have some clips from Sweet Smell of Success on my TikTok channel at Brooklyn Margot. Okay, everyone, we'll be back next week with a new episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Book versus Movie podcast. We are a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You can find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts. We follow the hashtags LadyPodSquad and Podern Family. If you want to support the show, you can go to our Patreon page, go to Patreon, and look for Book versus Movie Podcast. We have a basic Facebook page, but we also have a private Facebook group. Go to Facebook and type in Book vs. Movie Podcast Group if you want to join that. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Book versus Movie. Spell all those words out. If you'd like to send us an email, it's bookversusmoviepodcast, spelled it all out, at gmail.com. You can follow Margot D at Brooklyn Fit Chick on social media.